Ralph Vollmer had first noticed his wife Joan was behaving strangely a few weeks before he decided to stage a violent 4-day exorcism that led to her death. This is the true crime story of 49-year-old Joan Vollmer, whom was tortured for 4 days in order to excise her 10 demons from her body. Hello, my name is Holly. Welcome to the Murder She Shed. We would love for you to join us in the Murder She Shed, usually 2 times weekly for rarely heard true crime. So make sure you hit that subscribe button before we begin so you can join this Southern gal and her beautiful German Shepherd who happens to not be in the she shed right now every week. We would love to have ya. This case was suggested by an Australian subscriber. She actually knew the Vollmers and lived not too far away from Antwerp, where this story happens. Well, let's begin. Our story begins in Antwerp, a small town in western Victoria. In reality, it can hardly be called a town. It is no more than a grain silo, a general store, and about 6 houses. At the time, Antwerp had 63 residents. And during the time of Joan's exorcism in 1993, Antwerp was basically not even on the map. This exorcism put Antwerp on the map, and now people know it as the Antwerp Exorcism. Ralph was a German migrant to Australia who became a farmhand in order to make a living after coming to Australia. Ralph fell in love and married his first wife, who he had 2 sons with. His first wife passed away in the 70s, leaving him to raise his 2 sons by himself. After they were grown and moved away, Ralph met Joan in 1986, and they fell deeply in love. They felt like they were always meant to be together. It was true love right at the start. Joan, who had a list of tragedies in her life, had been essayed as a child, and her first husband had taken his own life. Joan had been diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teen. Soon after Ralph and Joan met, they had gotten married and purchased the little farmhouse in Antwerp in 1988. They enjoyed the quiet life on the farm. Ralph, who was a pig farmer, enjoyed taking care of his pigs, while his wife loved to garden. They were both shy and considered loners, so they didn't spend much time out of the farmhouse until after a few years of marriage when they began attending a church on Sundays. Ralph enjoyed his new religion much more than Joan did. But since her husband enjoyed going to church so much, she attended church just to make him happy. She just wanted to please her husband. She was a loving and caring person. Ralph became so fanatical about his new church that is all he wanted to discuss with anybody. In the spring of 1990, Joan's personality began to change. She began to constantly talk about her essay as a child in a childlike voice. Ralph even became so scared at her at one point, he locked her outside the house. Ralph described his wife as a foul-mouthed, angry woman who would tear off her clothes and run through the fields screaming. But haven't we all felt like doing that at some point in our life? I believe it's called menopause, ladies. And it happens in your 50s. Oh, only me? No, never mind. Forget I said that. Ralph decided his wife could be possessed. So he called his church up, who told him they could give him some marriage counseling. And that's all. I mean, at this point, Ralph had even come too fanatical for his own church. Ralph was ousted from his church along with some other really fanatical believers, and they began meeting on their own. Ralph decided with no help from the church, he would contact a doctor. The doctor quickly committed Joan to a psychiatric ward where she was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia and put on several medications. After Joan was released from the ward, they made another appointment with the doctor who made a small adjustment in Joan's prescribed medications due to her continued erratic behavior. Ralph decided he should just discuss with this new group of church family and friends what he was still continuing to go through with Joan's mental state. They suggested to him to pray for the evil spirits inside Joan to be bound. And for days, Ralph did just that. And lo and behold, Joan's mental state began to improve. Ralph believed it was a true miracle from God and not the fact that Joan's medication had finally been adjusted right. Ralph and Joan decided, because of this miracle, it was okay for Joan to discontinue her medications. and she also quit getting medical treatment from her new doctor. Ralph's offshoot church continued to meet with their new spiritual leader, Leah Clugston. In January 1993, Joan's mental state began to decline again. Joan had taken to lurching and dancing around outside, arms flaring about her head, swearing loudly at nobody in particular. Soon after, Ralph claimed she was acting like a lady of the night and at various times took on the physical form of a pig and a dog, as well as the personality of a sheep shearer. She would also speak about lewd activities. At first, he attempted to rid her of these demons himself by locking her in the basement. Then, when that was unsuccessful, he started tying her to bed. Joan screamed throughout the night, so Ralph was getting no sleep. I have to admit, if I'm being locked in the basement and being tied up, I might act a bit erratic myself. Does not seem like a good way to calm a frantic person to me. On January 21st, 1993, it was a very hot summer for people who lived in that area. One of the hottest summers they could even remember in Antwerp. When a friend of Joan's came to visit and stay a few days, her friend would be very confused by the way that Joan was acting. This didn't seem like Joan at all. Joan tore up the flowers her friend gave her and sang in a peculiar but beautiful voice. Her friend noticed Joan's stomach was swelled, and Joan told her friend during this visit that she was pregnant, but then she changed her mind and said she had a tumor. She also told her friend there were people outside wanting to essay her. The friend told Ralph before she left that he needed to get Joan some help. Ralph, not knowing what else he should even do, began to pray and felt like he received his answer. To call his neighbors and fellow churchgoers, John and Leanne Reichenbach. They quickly came over to assist Ralph in his distress. John began reading the Bible to Joan, while their spiritual leader, Leah Clugston, was assisting them over the phone. John read aloud a few passages from the Bible to Joan, but he had more pressing matters to attend to, so he left his wife at the VOLLMER'S house. Leanne and Ralph were certain that 10 separate demons were indeed in control of Joan's body. They started an intense prayer session with Joan seated in a chair at one end of the room. When she struggled, they tied her to this chair with pairs of her own stockings. She was denied food and water throughout this entire period. And when she attempted to close her eyes, they pried them open so the demons would better confront the Lord. Joan continued to put up a violent struggle, and so the pair called in another member of the church, 28-year-old David Klingner. He took the lead and restrained her with more pairs of stockings. He started to slap her face repeatedly in order to summon the demons. After 3 days of such torture, the group felt they had rid Joan of all but 3 stubborn demons, 2 females and 1 male. According to David, Joan became physically and verbally aggressive as time went on. But just going to put it out there, if someone was repeatedly slapping me in the face, or you, would you just sit there and take it? I would think not. I would be madder than a wet hen. I'm going to tell you that. Joan would beg for food and water, and this would cause the group to just pray harder and faster and louder. They were trying to starve the evil spirits out of her. As Joan began getting bruises from the exorcism, Ralph became concerned, stating this couldn't be what God wanted, but the group insisted it was exactly what God wanted, as it wasn't his wife they were battling, but her demons. On day 4, they decided that they needed more reinforcements for the many demons they still had to battle. So they called in Matthew Newski, a 23-year-old golf green attendant from Melbourne, who was said to have special powers enabling him to communicate with God. He joined them on the last day of Joan's life. Did you know that a 23-year-old golf green attendant has special powers? Yeah, me neither. Matthew took charge by running around the farmhouse 7 times with a length of clean food wrap in order to ward off any evil influences coming from the outside. He also ordered that Joan's vases, jewelry, and collection of porcelain figurines be smashed with a sledgehammer, and her garden beds and greenhouse plants destroyed in case they were satanic shrines or any other places where demons might lodge. Joan was then tied to a chair in the kitchen and shouted out so that her demons would identify themselves. She was slapped repeatedly. By the late afternoon of January 30th, it was thought that the demons that were left was known as a mother and daughter demon, Prince Joan and Princess Baby Joan, who were clutching to each other in her stomach and wouldn't move, and they refused to leave Joan's body. They also identified the strongest demon, named Legion. They now felt they needed to take a drastic measure to exorcise the demons that were still latched on. David said they needed to beat the demons out of Joan. They began to kick Joan and slam her head into cupboards and walls. They would spit on her and dash themselves with olive oil and dash Joan with olive oil. It was getting so much for Ralph that he felt physically sick from seeing them hurt his wife. He actually had to leave the room, but yet he didn't do anything to stop it. They moved her body into the bedroom for one final exorcism. The group of 5 started at her stomach and crushed her internal organs, moving their way up her body in order to squeeze the demon up and out her mouth. Basically, they sat on her, stomped on her, working their way all the way up. They were trying to squeeze the demons right out. Did you know you could do that? Who would have thought? The enormous pressure placed on her neck caused Joan to begin having a heart attack. After 2 hours of getting very physical with her, the 4 said the demons had moved up to her tongue, requiring her mouth to be forced open to let them out. But when the last demon finally let go of her tongue, she stopped breathing, or as Ralph put it, there was hissing and groaning as her lights went out. In short, the exorcism had been a success, but unfortunately, Joan had died. When attempts at resuscitation failed, Matthew left the farmhouse. The others stayed to pray and made telephone calls informing local fundamentalists and concerned friends that Joan is dead. And yes, she isn't dead, or that she died during a spiritual attack, but she was going to arise again. The group had waited and prayed over Joan's dead body for 2 days when Leah Cluxton, the spiritual leader, arrived at the farmhouse. The 78-year-old had given early phone advice to the group on how best to proceed and had herself received word from the Lord shortly after Joan's death that she should place her hands on the bloated, quickly decaying body in order Joan to rise and walk. When this failed to arouse her, Cluxton called a local Baptist minister for guidance. A local Baptist pastor decided to go visit the VOLLMER'S to see what in the world was going on. When the pastor arrived, the group were eating lunch while Joan's dead composing body was laying on the kitchen table, swarming with flies. Bodily fluids, urine, and feces on the table and seeping onto the floor underneath. The pastor quickly called the police. On the Friday, just 4 days after the police first became aware of Joan's body, Ralph invited media to her funeral to witness her resurrection. At the funeral, when Joan didn't arise from the dead, Ralph began to cry. Ralph, who had brought clothes for Joan to wear when she rose, was photographed breaking down as her coffin was lowered into the ground. Despite their open confessions and detailed description to police, Leon Reichenbach got the heaviest sentence, a paltry 4 months for manslaughter and false imprisonment. David Klingner received 3 months for the same charges, while Matthew Nusk was found guilty of false imprisonment and received a suspended sentence. Ralph, who orchestrated his wife's torture and death, was convicted of false imprisonment and reckless injury. He also received a suspended sentence and served no jail time. He soon sold the farmhouse and left the small town where Joan had died to move to Queensland to live in bliss with his now new wife. The house was resold a couple of times, but no one actually moved into it after the exorcism. Teens would often visit it hoping to get a scare. Because of the constant break-ins and no upkeep to the old farmhouse, it has now been destroyed. Joan Vollmer's relatives denounced Ralph and his religious cohorts, saying Joan had never been religious before she died at the hands of the extreme group. Yeah, crazy story. But that completes my story of the exorcism of Joan Vollmer. Yes, a very true, crazy story. I know, I almost thought, wow, this is not a real true crime story. But it was very real. Sorry, Australians. I love y'all and I hope y'all have a blessed week. Come back and see me now, you hear? Bye. So you can see me and Simon in my she shed, but not today. Some days. Sometimes I'm in my she shed. Just not today. Anyway, if you want to see us some more, hit the subscribe button. We'll tell you some true crime stories that maybe you have never heard. And you get his comic acts along with that. the exorcism would happen in this small community. But let's go back. Lay down, Bubba. Oh, God. Okay, he's gonna lay right here while we discuss. Yeah, this is working out grand. Buddy's underneath me here. Yeah, maybe I should film in my she shed. I might just see y'all in a minute in my she shed. Too needy sometimes, Bubba. I know, you're a needy boy. You needy too much attention. You needy too much attention, baby. Some days he feels like a nut. Some days he don't. Today he feels like a nut. Can you see this attitude I'm getting right here? What? I know that's hurting your ears. I'm gonna have to unplug the mic. Your attitude. Story over. Before it even began, it's over. I'm well protected. I got Buddy in the floor over here beside me. No one is getting inside this house. Overwhelming amount of love. Almost too much sometimes. I almost get carried away with this love. Yo, little buddies laying in the floor, being nice, and y'all giving me attitude. What's up with that? Oh my God, Max. You want to sit on me, dude? No licking my face. No licking my face. Max is bad about licking you in the face, and I don't like it. He's horrible about licking me in the face, and I hate it. I'm just gonna film outside. I'll see you in a little bit. Out of here. As well as the personality of a sheep shearer. Sheep shearer. Personality I would have took, but anyway. I would be madder than a wet hen. I'm gonna tell you that. That would piss me off. Sorry. That would. I don't know if I say that on YouTube. That would really make me mad.